Good evening, everybody. How are you? Good to see you. It's been a while since we've been together, so it's really nice to see everyone out. We see some familiar faces, and we see some new faces. So welcome to the Vernon M and Minnie I Lynch Lecture. As you know, this is our premier event for the Carter School, and we are really glad that you're here. If you remember last year, we had some rules, right? I'm not going to give you those rules tonight because we've been a little busy here at the Carter School, so I think you know, but I will mention that we're going to ask you not to record, and please don't take any photos tonight. Our wonderful team, GMU TV, is here, so the recording will be made available to you after the event, right? But if you want to take a selfie, you can do that right now. So I'm going to ask you to take your phone out. This is a fun activity, okay? We're going to ask you to take your phone out and just take a selfie with the person next to you, behind you, and then just tag us, okay? Oh, my phone is down there. I'll give you 30 more seconds. Okay, good. So now that you are aware that your phone is out, I'm going to ask you to silence your phone, okay? All right, all right. All right, well, we're going to get ready to get started. But what I want to make a quick mention of is I'm sure when you came in, you saw a whole bunch of people probably greeted you, checked you in, made you feel welcome, asked you to sign our digital wall in the multipurpose room. This event has been completely supported by some of our Carter School students, specifically our Carter School ambassadors. These are our future peace builders, and they wanted you to know why they chose the Carter School. So we're going to play a short video, and then we're going to get started.
When I think of the Carter School, I think of the word opportunity. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after high school. None of the majors really stuck out to me at any of the schools I applied to. And once I found the Carter School, I was actually really motivated to go to college, meet new people, and really find out what I wanted to do with my life.
Okay, so I picked the Carter School because it's multidisciplinary. So when I was applying to colleges, a lot of other majors felt a little restricted and limited in what I could do and where my academics would go. But at the Carter School, what I love is that we're taught to utilize other perspectives, how to find them, and then how to effectively utilize them and seek out other lenses so that we can get the biggest scope and biggest range.
That you can't say it's only international relations, it's only domestic, it's only like counseling. It's basically a skill set you're learning that can be used in a wide variety of areas.
A community of people who are very passionate about conflict and global issues that are very important to them.
It's not just about resolving conflicts on a worldwide scale or just for yourself, but it's about having a mindset of conflict resolution.
Peace and conflict is the collective and collaborative process to resolve conflict without any violence occurring and to really make sure that all sides are properly heard, to deliver proper justice and reparations when viable, and to create a functional community by the end of the process.
All right, those are our future peace leaders. And we just want our Carter School ambassadors to stand. We just really want to acknowledge you and thank you for being here tonight. These are our students. All right, so I'm going to get out of your way. Thank you, Mark, our guest speaker, Professor Mark Howard. He's here tonight. At this time, I want you to join me in welcoming our Dean, Dean Alpaslan Ozaderm, as he makes some introductory remarks.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and peace builders. It's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you all to our annual Vernon and Minnie Lynch lecture. And I'm particularly proud of hosting Professor Marc M as our keynote speaker this evening. Professor M, welcome. Before moving with the proceedings of tonight's program, I think we must pause and cast our minds to current tragedies in the Middle East that have once again highlighted the fragility of peace in our world. The devastating renewal of the Israel-Palestine conflict, along with the heart-rending situations in places like Ukraine, Yemen, Libya, Myanmar, Syria, Somalia, Mali, and the DRC, amongst many others, paints a bleak picture. Civilians, often the most vulnerable among us, women and children, are left bearing the scars of war, both seen and unseen. Their lives, livelihoods, and human dignity hang in the balance. In this present moment, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of history. Peace, a concept that seems innate to our human essence, is more endangered today than ever. And these humanitarian tragedies are a poignant reminder of our immense responsibility. They remind us of the cost of conflict as senseless killings and destruction, displacement, dispossession, and disintegration of trust and social ties. They remind us of the imperative call for protecting civilians from violence and the need to heal their unbearable physical and psychological suffering and trauma. They remind us of the desperate cries for justice, human rights, and human security, no matter where they are needed and by whom. There are also sad reality that our divisions seem to be deepening, and the narratives of war are taking over our actions for governance and community relations. As a society and global community, we face stark choices that profoundly affect our shared future. Yet, even in these dark times, rays of hope pierce through. Around the world, institutions, organizations, and dedicated individuals are diligently striving to care for the fragile seeds of dialogue, cooperation, coexistence, and peace. Often, however, their fearless efforts go unnoticed, and their struggles are underfunded. Their peace infrastructures are under constant attack, and every day they witness the power of the military-industrial complex, proxy wars of geopolitics, and suffering of communities torn apart by physical, structural, and cultural violence. But make no mistake, their role in our shared global narrative is pivotal. They are the bastion against chaos, the remedy of wounds that run generations deep, and the bridge builders in a fractured world. For the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, the Carter name signifies more than just a legacy. It's a torch, a commitment, a promise. When we speak of the Carters, we speak of a relentless dedication to peace, a deep-rooted belief in the transformative power of dialogue an unwavering commitment to creating a more just, inclusive, and harmonious world. The Carters have shown that peace isn't a mere idealistic dream, but an active, relentless pursuit. It's the greatest good requiring courage, resilience, and undying belief in humanity's ability to rise above its differences. The Carters urge us to think for peace, act for peace, and be peace. The Carter School, shaped and inspired by this legacy, is a beacon in these turbulent times. It's where future peacemaking and peace-building leaders are nurtured, conflict analysis and diplomacy instruments are developed, and the seeds of peace take root and flourish. Every student graduated, every dialogue facilitated, every research undertaken, and every partnership for peace launch echoes the Carter's vision. A world where conflicts are resolved not through force, but through negotiations, not through domination, but through mutual respect and justice. As we gather this evening for the annual Lynch lecture, our collective journey toward peace, let us remember that we are not passive spectators. We need to see what's happening in the world right beyond the narratives of war, and we need to take sides with conflict resolution. We are the change makers, the advocates, the champions of a world where justice, compassion, and peace prevail. Be worthy the weight of responsibility, but also the privilege of possibility. In the face of overwhelming adversity, the Carter legacy stands as a testament to our shared ability to forge a brighter future. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us call upon every individual, organization, and nation to join hands in this noble pursuit of conflict resolution, ensuring that tales of justice, compassion, and enduring peace define our shared history. Thank you. Now, distinguished guests, I'd like to introduce our host this evening, Dr. Susan Hirsch. Susan Hirsch is the Vernon M and Minnie Lynch Chair and Professor of Conflict Resolution and Anthropology at the Carter School. Her work primarily deals with legal aspects of conflict, including international justice, religious minority integration, and environmental issues, using a feminist lens and focusing on experiential learning and legal reactions to terrorism. Her current book project innovates a conflict-tailored rule of law approach supported by field research in Malta and Kenya. Dr. Hirsch has made a vast contribution to the field through her publications and has held leadership roles, including as a Fulbright lecturer, a trustee, a president of various anthropological associations, and as an editor of renowned journals, while also developing practical learning programs for students and serving in many administrative capacities at the Carter School and George Mason University. Dr. Hirsch, Susan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. That's very nice. Good evening. Thank you, Alp, and thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I hope that you all had an opportunity to take a look at the really terrific exhibit in the room across the hallway. These pieces are from Art and Incarceration, an exhibit curated at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia and it's been displayed for the past couple of months out on Fairfax campus here at GMU. These brave and visually stunning works were created by incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals. I couldn't be more pleased that that exhibit accompanies tonight's lecture. And I just want to express really deep gratitude to my colleague Patricia Malden for helping to make that happen. I see some snaps for her. And also really very grateful to Yasmin Salem and Sophie Bay of Mason Exhibitions for getting these pieces here for us. Please view it and offer your reflections. We have a QR code that you can use to let us know what you think. It's really been an honor to hold the Lynch Chair, and I'm grateful to the Lynch family for their generosity to the Carter School, particularly in providing the grounds for Point of View, our retreat and conference center not far from here. The school holds this lecture annually as a tribute to the Lynch family's contributions. I want to give a few other thanks, and there's a number of them, and that's really to the team who worked so hard to put together this event, including the lovely reception. First and foremost, I want to thank Mercedes Alsop, Executive Assistant to the Dean, who just thought of everything to make this a really wonderful evening. Carter School ambassadors, thank you. Carter School program staff members, thank you. Volunteers from the Transitioning Justice Peace Lab, our Carter School marketing team, other staff, GMU TV, GMU Creative Services, Arlington Events team, thank you all. Thank you to my husband, Michael Sullivan, for all of his support. I'm also appreciative and want to alert you that the GMU bookstore will be here tonight with copies of Professor Howard's book for sale. The title of that book is Unusually Cruel: Prisons, Punishment, and the Real American Exceptionalism. So more on that topic in just a moment, but please first give a big round of applause to everyone who made tonight possible. As Lynch Chair, my activities are focused on the theme of justice. What role can and should commitments to justice play in the peace and conflict field? Under that theme, I've been really thrilled to co-establish with Patricia Malden the Transitioning Justice Peace Lab. We host projects under two broad themes: restorative justice and carceral societies. Check out our table and the tables representing the other labs and initiatives around the school over at the reception afterwards. There are a couple of reasons I wanted to focus on the theme of carceral societies for tonight's Lynch lecture. The first reason stems from the Carter School's growing commitment to providing access to education for students living in carceral spaces. The extraordinary individuals who have joined our program from inside have contributed enormously to our classrooms, labs, and school conversations, and to the intellectual work in peace and conflict. With Patricia Malden's persistence, the support of our dean and other faculty and staff, we are surely moving toward expanding our enrollment and thereby enriching the field by including people who are residents in jails and prison, as returning citizens, and as people seeking to live without stigma. And my hope is that tonight's discussion will stimulate Carter School's ability to serve the educational needs of people affected by what our speaker tonight calls the unusual cruelty of our U.S. carceral system. My second reason for tonight's theme was to use it as a window into conceptual areas of key interest in the conflict field: structural violence, dehumanization, trauma, redemption, These concepts show up in our courses, our writing, our practice. Yet not too often are they framed through carceral spaces. Take structural violence. What, for instance, can we learn about structural violence by thinking about it through the lens of domestic carceral spaces? We might ask, how does the violence of carcerality differ, if at all, in US prisons, in hostage situations, in places that confine people behind borders not of their own choosing? Redemption. What role might education, and peace education in particular, contribute toward redemption from the trauma of dehumanizing incarceration or other dehumanizing experiences that we encounter so often in the conflicts that we study? My expectation is that Professor Howard's talk tonight will lead us to think about these and other key concepts with new insight, perhaps through this lens. Let me say a few words about Professor Howard's work and accomplishments. His most recent book focuses on the punitiveness of American prisons. He argues that any discussion of American exceptionalism needs to confront the reality that American prisons are shamefully emblematic of how this nation falls short of its stated democratic principles. Not only does he show how and why this happens, but he also contrasts the carceral situation here with that of our European counterparts. Why do prisons look different in other places? So I know there are students from the PhD methods class in attendance here tonight. Please note, Professor Howard has produced a book that is an excellent comparative case study. So thinking about methods, you may want to check it out for that reason. I expect we'll hear more about his terrific book during his talk. Professor Howard has earned degrees from Yale, Berkeley, and Georgetown. He's a professor of government and law at Georgetown. Among his accomplishments there is the Prisons and Justice Initiative. The projects carried out through that renowned initiative address prison reentry, education inside, and efforts toward exoneration. His teaching is really a model for engaged learning, especially his popular course called Making an Exoneree. In that course, undergraduates reinvestigate cases of wrongful conviction. And no doubt this course and others have led to Dr. Howard receiving teaching awards and recognition at Georgetown. I think he'll talk about another initiative, the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice, during his talk tonight. That nonprofit focuses on shifting public perceptions to recognize the humanity in all of us. What a needed initiative right now to recognize the humanity in all of us. My hope is that hearing about Professor Howard's work resonates with our commitments to engaged research, theory, practice, and teaching here at Carter School. Marc Howard has changed many lives in his unrelenting quest to bring humanity into the conversation about prisons in the United States. I'm really grateful for your work, Marc, and I join the many people who are inspired by it. So please join me in thanking Professor Howard for coming to speak to us tonight, and let's welcome him to the podium. Thank you so much.
It was beautiful. Susan, thank you so much for that beautiful, touching introduction. You know, many times people just read a bio from a website, and it shows how much care you put in, and I really appreciate it. I also want to thank your team, Mercedes in particular, but everybody. As somebody who puts on events, I know how much work takes place behind the scenes, and this has been truly extraordinary and a model. So congratulations and thank you. I really appreciate it. I want to thank the Dean of the Carter School. I want to thank the faculty who are here, and of course, the staff and the students. Students make up the heart and soul of any program, any school, and this is really an extraordinary and inspirational institution, and I'm really honored to be here, to be delivering the Lynch lecture, and just to be a part of the community with you and sharing this space with you tonight. I'm also really pleased and touched that the companion piece, and I don't see Patricia, but where is she? I also want to acknowledge Patricia for this exhibit, which is truly extraordinary and inspiring. As somebody who spends a lot of time in prisons, as we'll talk about, who sees the talent that is just forgotten, abandoned, discarded by society, to have you showcase it in that way is really inspiring to me. And I thank you for that, and I'm honored that it's a perfect companion for everything that I'm going to be saying tonight. Thank you. So the title of the talk, Humanity in the Inhumane, I just want to explain it to be sure there are no misunderstandings. The inhumane are the conditions in prisons. Prison conditions in the United States are inhumane regardless of the location, and there's a variety of security levels and so on, but to put it bluntly, we put human beings in cages. And that is a practice that is grotesque, and it is distinctively American. And there's something that's wrong with it, in particular because as somebody who goes inside of prisons and jails all around the country on a regular basis, including yesterday in Flint, Michigan, and on Monday in Cole Township, wherever that is, Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere, I'm constantly finding some of the most beautiful people who are flawed, as we all are, who've made mistakes, but who are desperately seeking to connect with a society that sadly, tragically, has rejected them completely. And what I'm trying to do is to bridge that gap. And so every day, I'm fighting to provide opportunities and connection and meaning to incarcerated people. I'm trying to support them on their journey to reentry because 95% of people in prison are coming home. There are many people in society who would like to forget them forever, but 95% are coming home into our communities. And I want them to find a place where they can be at home, where they can be welcome, where they can succeed, and they can never go back to those cages again. And I'm also trying very hard to change the narrative about incarcerated people, to break down the awful stereotypes that shows like Law and Order and so much TV and news has created about the simple dichotomy of good and evil, and people who commit crimes are evil and should be separated, and we, the good people, should sleep well at night knowing the bad people are away. That is just so false. Life is so much more complex. And so what I'm doing now in what really is a second career, and I'm going to explain a little bit of that transition, is simply fighting with every ounce of energy, every fiber of my being, every gasp of my breath, is to try to get the world to understand the humanity of people who are stuck in these inhumane conditions. And I have a privilege to be able to do this through the programs that I've been able to create and the wonderful people that I'm associated with, where I've now spent, and I have a rough tally, over 1,100 days in prisons and jails. I'm going in usually several times a week and trying to bring hope, but also learn and recharge my batteries and refuel my tank to be spreading their message and to be bringing their voices into society. I used to say that they didn't have a voice, and I'm speaking for the voices. They do have a voice, it's just that no one listens, no one hears them. And I'm trying to channel their voices, their talents, their character, their integrity, so that they can come home to society that would actually welcome them. This is all a second career for me. There are a few people in this room, Agnieszka, Terrence, remember, and some others, Tom, knew me in my first career, which was as a political scientist, comparativist, specializing in European politics. It had nothing to do with prisons, nothing to do with the United States. I never took any formal training whatsoever. I'm half French, a dual citizen, native speaker of French. I've lived in Germany and speak fluent German, and also lived in Russia and speak fluent Russian, although it's getting pretty rusty. That's what all my training was, my first two books, many articles, career, comparative politics. But everything changed. And it changed for a reason that's very personal that I'm going to lay out at the beginning here. And that has come to drive everything that I do with every waking minute that I have. And I don't sleep very much. I was up at 4:45 a.m. to catch a flight from Michigan and go straight into a classroom and it's already been a very long day, but I'm here with a lot of energy and excitement because I believe in the people that I'm going to be talking about. So I put this slide up just to give a sense, because there's often confusion. Some people say I'm really doing 4 full-time jobs, and these are the programs that I've founded and am involved with. All of them have great teams of people that are incredibly dedicated. Some are through Georgetown, some are independent nonprofits that I've started, and some I'm less directly involved with but got going. And I'm going to explain a little bit. And then there's the book Unusually Cruel, which, as I'll explain in a minute, is dedicated to a very dear friend who's really the North Star, the starting point for my journey in this direction. But in that book, as Susan laid out, it's really a comparative exploration. It's kind of a bridging, in a way, of my past career as a comparativist into somebody really very, very focused on the American criminal legal system. And note, by the way, that I didn't say criminal justice system. And I'd ask all of you to no longer use that term, because there's no justice in that system. It's a misnomer. It's a criminal legal system. It's really a criminal punishment system. It's a criminal punishment system, if we really want to call it what it is. So I'm going to explain a little bit about these programs, but really what I'm trying to do is, as I said, channel the voices of people inside. And I want to start with the origin story, but I'm going to give a little preface to that first that's also very personal. And I'm going to reveal something and actually show you a document that proves it, that explains why every time I go into a prison or a jail, I walk in and I say, I don't judge you. I'm looking at where you are today, not where you were before, and where you want to go. And I want to help you on that journey. And the reason why is because when I was 13 years old, I was arrested. My first day in a jail was in London, having been arrested, as you see here, for theft and shoplifting. There's a story behind it, and I tell it actually in the preface of Unusually Cruel. My parents were very upset. They were like, no one was supposed to know about that. I had a juvenile criminal record in the UK until I turned 18. I was banned for life from HMV music stores, but good news, they don't exist anymore, so I'm safe. I don't want to overstate this. This was obviously a minor juvenile, act of delinquency, but I was doing a lot of other stupid things. And those could have led me down a path, and perhaps more likely had it not been in London, had it been in the US, certainly more likely had the color of my skin been darker in the United States. These are factors that we can't deny that are central to understanding this criminal punishment system. But nonetheless, it's there, it happened, and it's a part of me, and I just want to be public and open about it. And it explains so much of the process I go through when I deal with people who are incarcerated, which is I too made mistakes. And it started very young. For so many people, it starts young. Now, the bigger origin story that's really so central to everything that I think about, and frankly, even in the work that I'm doing today, is in the dedication to my book for my friend and inspiration, Marty Tankleff. I'm going to explain a little bit what's in these photos, because it tells just a horrific story that could have happened to anybody here, heaven forbid, but it happened to Marty. I should say that Marty and I have known each other since we were 3 years old. We're born 9 days apart. I'm 9 days older than him. And we met at the age of 3 at a place called Lovey-Dovey Preschool. I'm not kidding. Long Island, New York, Lovey-Dovey Preschool. And we went to the same elementary, middle school, high school in a community called Port Jefferson, New York, Suffolk County, New York on Long Island. But on the first day of our senior year, we just turned 17. We're both late August birthdays. Marty woke up to something absolutely horrific. He woke up on that very exciting day that was supposed to start, the top of the pyramid of high school, being seniors. And Marty found his parents brutally murdered in their own house. And as if there could be nothing worse than being orphaned and finding his parents' bodies, by the end of the day, he was arrested and charged with the murder of his parents. And by the next summer, he was convicted and sentenced to 50 years to life in maximum security prison in upstate New York. Now, it's such a long story. And for those who are interested in learning more, there's some things that are coming out, a scripted series that's in development, People magazine is doing a feature that comes out in 10 days. It'll be in the print issue December 4th. It'll be online a few days earlier. The short version of that story is that Marty was innocent, and I believed in Marty. And I didn't just believe it because he was my friend and I thought, oh, my friend couldn't do this. Although I did know that Marty weighed 140 pounds and that his parents were over 200 pounds each, and it seemed completely implausible. I also investigated the case as a young, at the time I thought, future journalist who was reporting it for that very famous newspaper that I'm sure you've all heard of called the Purple Parrot, the high school newspaper of our local public high school, which in retrospect I think deserves a Pulitzer Prize because we're the only newspaper in all of New York that got the story right, which was that Marty was innocent. And what I found is evidence that his father's business partner cleared out a joint bank account, that he had motive, opportunity. He was the last person to leave the house at 3 a.m. when there was a late-night poker game. He moved his car to let someone else move a car out and then came back in. And later, much later, we learned that he hired hitmen to kill Marty's parents and paid off a police detective to frame Marty. It's unthinkable. But at the time, no one listened to me, 17-year-old, budding journalist. Marty was completely railroaded. Our lives went in very different directions. He likes to say this line, I cringe a little bit every time. He says, Mark went to Yale, I went to jail. So our lives went in two polar opposite directions. And we lost touch for a number of years. And I would always tell people, I have a friend in prison who's innocent. Some people would believe me, ask questions. I could take over a dinner party or a gathering with the story. There's so many details that would just blow your mind about this case. A lot of people thought I was crazy. You just thought I was making it up or just loyal, and somehow just naive that, oh, my friend couldn't do that. But Marty always stayed close to me. And at one point, I had just gotten hired at Georgetown to teach comparative politics. And I reached out to Marty, and we started writing letters. I have several shoeboxes of letters from prison. And then I started visiting him in prison. And I got very involved. I started meeting with his legal team. And I started doing research for him. And it was funny because I was at the time a young professor. I had a few research assistant students who were doing research for me, but I became Marty's research assistant. I was helping him. And it got to the point where it became what some called my obsession, was just working on Marty's case, doing everything I could. And one day in the prison visiting room, after many visits, I said to Marty, I'm going to do everything I can to get you out of prison. And I said, I'm going to go to law school. And so even though by then I'd just gotten tenure, was a Georgetown professor, I could have just kicked back and played golf every day or whatever, just sat around. I actually became a first-year law student and then became a full professor while I was still in law school. And it was a crazy life. That's a whole other story, how I did it. I told you I don't need much sleep, fortunately. But I just kept going. And Marty's story, as you can see, has a happy ending. After 6,338 days and nights, remember, I've been in 1,100 days, but no nights. That makes a big difference, the nights. But that's 17 and a half years, almost 18 years Marty served for a crime he didn't commit after being orphaned. He was finally exonerated. And this is a picture about an hour after he walked out of prison. I was there. I'd actually just arrived in France with my family over the holidays, and I flew right back to be there. And I have chills even speaking about it. It's one of the greatest moments of my life. I count it with the birth of my children as sort of the moments that just were the most moving, most touching. And by the way, just one quick aside, I like to tell this joke. When you look at the two pictures, this is from our high school yearbook. If someone were to say, one of those two people gets sentenced to 50 to life in prison, who would it be? I think everybody's going to go with that guy on the right there. I tend not to smile in pictures. But there's a beautiful ending. Marty was on the Oprah show. She had me on, actually, from my office through Skype, and it was a great story. But, almost 18 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit after losing your parents. It's hard to imagine something worse. And what's extraordinary about Marty is that he has channeled that pain, that suffering, what he endured, into helping others. He won a settlement. He won $3.4 million from the state, $10 million from Suffolk County. He could be literally just sipping martinis on a beach somewhere, just enjoying life. but he works every day. You know what he did? 2 weeks after getting out, he was in college classes, rushing to get his bachelor's degree. Then he took a job as a paralegal for the lawyer that had worked to free him. He was working 9 to 5, and then he went to law school at night, 6 to 10 p.m. He became an attorney. He passed the New York bar exam. He's now a criminal defense attorney in New York State. He just yesterday won several cases and got dismissed. He's been back to the same courthouse where he was wrongfully convicted. He called me from the parking lot and said, Mark, I think I'm going into the same courtroom. And I just said, I don't know how you can do it, man. He's almost had to appear in front of a judge who was his prosecutor. This is a distinguished crowd, so I'll avoid profanity. When I teach, I use a lot of profanity, but there's some special words that I would use for that person. And I don't even know how that works in terms of conflict of interest. You know, Your Honor, you ruined my life and committed egregious acts of misconduct to get me wrongfully convicted, and I would like you to recuse yourself. I don't think that's ever happened before, but Marty somehow stays calm and positive. And now, I should say, so I'd been teaching at Georgetown, went to law school, started shifting my teaching more gradually from the democratization field that I'd worked in previously to the prisons and punishment systems. And Marty started coming down and giving guest lectures, and it was amazing for my students, and he's a phenomenal public speaker, and it was such a great and valuable part of the class that I once said to him, basically, what if we taught a whole class together? What if we became co-professors? And then we started a class called Making an Exoneree, and we started in the spring of 2018, and the theme was wrongful convictions. And what our goal was, and this is about experiential learning with students on steroids, which is we said, we are going to teach our students, not just passively, but actively work on real wrongful conviction cases using our own experience on both sides of a wrongful conviction. Obviously, I had the better end on that end of the two, but using what we'd both been through, the pain, the struggle that we'd been through, to have our students try to get people who were wrongfully convicted free. We knew it was a Herculean task. We knew it was almost hopeless, that there was so little chance that it could actually work, because what you're up against in this country is a system that's based on the principle of finality, on closure, and that when there's a conviction, they don't want to hear it again. Anything admitted at trial, even if it's complete lies, is admitted as fact. It can't be contested again. You can only look at issues of law, not of fact. There's so many problems with this system, in particular with wrongful convictions. A lot of people who heard about our course thought, oh, that's really cute. You know, it's a moot exercise. You're taking like fictitious cases and you're showing how you could do it. And we said, no, we're working on real cases. These are real people in prison. We're getting phone calls from prison. That class, by the way, is a circus act, because we literally, first of all, we have guests all the time. There's cameras all the time. There's a podcast being recorded. And we have a policy. We take calls from prison. Whenever we interrupt anything, if we get a call from prison, which we do all the time, we'll put it on speaker. We'll put it through the Zoom. We'll find ways of getting their voices out there. And so we never know what's coming. Every single class session, and our classes are 4.5 hours. It's a 5-credit course on Fridays, starting in the morning. You couldn't believe the demand from students who normally would never take a class on a Friday, especially in the morning. It's highly entertaining, but most of all, we're giving students an opportunity to pursue justice and to make change themselves. So, as I said, at first people thought it was cute, you know, good try, you know, go for it, you know, see what happens. To be honest, we didn't expect all that much, because we know that it takes a long time. And even in Marty's case, all those years, he had 19 different appeals. The first 18 were shot down. One judge called all these witnesses who came forward implicating the same business partner and so on, he called them a cavalcade of nefarious scoundrels. This is what a judge said. One of them was a priest, one was a nun, by the way. This is what we're up against, is a system with judges and prosecutors, and 90% of judges are former prosecutors, by the way, which is an inherent problem, who are hell-bent on dismissing cases, on pushing aside the truth, and on preserving convictions. But 4 months after we ended that first class, the top left picture, Valentino Dixon walked out of prison after 27 years for a crime he clearly didn't commit. Someone else had confessed to the crime 2 days after he was arrested. Yeah, you can clap for Valentino. And 2 of our students flew back. The 3rd was in Japan and unable to make it. And we were there to walk Valentino Dixon out of prison after 27 years. He would still be there today if our students had not found new evidence that broke his case open. These are undergraduate students, I want to stress. They're like 21, some are not even of drinking age, and they're helping an innocent person walk free. I have to do a little aside also for Patricia's sake to mention that Valentino Dixon is an extraordinary artist, and it's through his artwork that we even heard of his case. He drew golf courses in prison, even though he never set foot on a golf course. He developed this technique. He was not allowed to have paint in Attica. He had colored pencils, and he developed this technique where he had 30 layers of colors one upon another. It would take him just countless hours, and he drew 10 to 12 hours a day in his 6 by 8 foot cell in Attica for 27 years. And through that art and the drawing of golf courses, he was discovered by Golf Digest magazine, and then the Golf Channel did a short documentary, and they said, well, his case looks really weird because someone else confessed to the crime and there's no evidence against him. We were able to pick it up from there and find the evidence that got him free. But what I like to say is Valentino drew himself out of prison through his art because we wouldn't have heard of him without his art. So there's also the power of art leading to freedom. But he says also that, and it's ironic that it was golf courses as someone who'd never set foot on one before, is that he said that there was something about drawing golf courses, the beauty, the calm, that made him feel free. And that's why he chose to draw golf courses. He has hundreds of them. I have over 100 that are actually in my house that I store for him that are just stunning. He even started to design golf courses. You know, he's like a golf course architect, and he has this beautiful imagery, this sense of proportion and space and the pastoral scenes. It's really extraordinary. So I just wanted to highlight Valentino with the art connection. I next want to mention that about a month after he was exonerated, we had an event at Georgetown that I was hosting. I don't have a photo of it, but let's just say the younger people here will know the reference. Not everyone will. It was an event with Meek Mill, who's a rapper who has had issues with the criminal legal system, who was on probation multiple times, who had a very vindictive judge. He got sent back for 2 years for popping a wheelie while filming a music video, for breaking up a fight in the airport, even though he separated people. It's really a terrible story. And he's an amazing person, whatever you think of his music and his social media and so on. But we hosted an event. It was on the criminal legal system, on the issue of probation and parole. And right before we went onto the stage, as they were introducing me, they mentioned that I'd helped somebody get out of prison who had served 27 years wrongfully convicted. And Meek turned to me and he said, yo, I got a friend who's been in prison for 27 years who's innocent. And I said, what's his name? He said, Eric Riddick. I said, can you send me the info on his case? He said, absolutely, and he followed up and he did. And then a year and a half later, his friend Eric Riddick walked out of prison after 29 and a half years for a crime he didn't commit, again with our students who were there to greet him. So you can get struck by lightning once, and maybe that's a fluke. It happened a second time. A month later, Keith Washington walked out. We were able to get his sentence reduced to time served from 45-year sentence to time served, which was 13 years. And he walked out, and the closing words of a judge, this was during COVID, it was a Zoom hearing, the judge said, keep up the great work, Georgetown. I mean, we had been able to bring this case to the attention of the judge, and the prosecutor, I should give credit, supported this decision to release him, and Keith walked out. A year later, Orlando Jones III, and I'm going to come back to him in a little bit, who was also my student in prison when I started teaching and volunteering in prisons in 2014. We were able to help him get his sentence reduced and get him released. Trey served, get this, 37 years, 2 months, and a day in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He went in at 16, he walked out at 54. Think about that. But with a big smile on his face, and our students were there with us to greet him and walk him out. Trey's now my colleague. I was with him today. We hired him at the Georgetown Prisons and Justice Initiative, and he's amazing. He was speaking to a delegation of British lawyers who came to visit us today. I did a welcome quickly, and then Trey just regaled them with stories, with experience. He's a brilliant man. He's a philosopher. He's written 2 books. He reads philosophy all day. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met, yet dropped out of school in 8th grade. And that's a concept I want to come to later, which is that intelligence and education are 2 different things, and I've learned that in prisons. Some of the smartest people I know, like Trey, dropped out of school in 8th grade. That doesn't mean they were dumb. That means they were in some really terrible situations and schools and ultimately an environment that led him to prison, in particular in Trey's case for a crime he didn't commit. Now, he admits that he was involved in a lot of bad activity. Right? He was working in a drug organization. Trey was orphaned at the age of 8, basically grew up on the streets. It's just a childhood, again, that's distinctively American in many urban areas in the US. But boy, has he managed to overcome those conditions and 37 years in prison. And talk about freeing your mind. Trey is just extraordinary and so inspiring. Inspires me every single day. So that was 4. And then we entered 2023 this year. And we've had a good year because Kenneth Bond, who was also my student in prison, who had nothing going in his case until he talked to me about it, and I said, I believe him. I met his family, I did the research, and then our students took on his case, and it took, unfortunately, a long time. And Kenneth was released on February 9th of 2023. We weren't sure of the date. I was actually at that point representing him. It was the first time that I've actually argued in court for somebody, and I actually almost broke down. It was emotional. I care about him so much. And we weren't sure. There was a whole calculation of the release date. He wasn't sure what day it was going to be, and Kenneth called me at noon. I'm his last call from prison. And he said, Mark, they told me to pack my stuff. I think I'm going home right now. I said, I was literally like on my way to campus to teach. It was like, turn around. And I called, and we have some group texts and so on with our students and our staff members at the Prisons and Justice Initiative. I said, anyone who can make it, go straight to this prison. It's in Maryland. It's about 45 minutes away. I said, it'll be one of the greatest days of your life. And look who showed up. This was our team from Georgetown who showed up. Just extraordinary group of students, of staff, just of dedicated people. Most people when they leave prison, they're lucky if there's 1 or 2 people there to greet them. Some people walk out and there's nobody. They're looking for a bus, And Kenneth walked out to this incredible family of people who cared about him. And he's extraordinary. He just graduated from the University of Baltimore, which had a program in his prison. He was almost at graduation February 9th. He still had a few more classes left for that semester, and he finished them on the outside, and he walked across the stage in May of this year with a bachelor's degree. Now, this year, we also did something else with our program. We expanded it to other schools, and it's something we're looking to do in the future, and we're making an exoneree as what you might call a franchise, although it's certainly not a business. It's a justice franchise, you could say. And what we're trying to do is develop this model in a way where we supervise it and control it. There are a lot of very sensitive legal and ethical issues at play, but expand it to other schools. And we did a pilot at Princeton University just this past spring. We had a merged course in some respects, where there's a lot through Zoom and joint guest speakers, and they came down here, we went up there. And a miracle happened there, which is that Muti Osajabo Agamo, who had served 42 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, we were able to get him paroled. Not exonerated, but we were able to fulfill his parole application. He'd been denied 3 times, just slapped down, and suddenly he had Princeton University, Georgetown University making an exoneree backing him. He called us on the day of his hearing. He's like, they're calling me sir, they're asking me nice questions, they're treating me like a human being, which should just be the case for everyone, right? You shouldn't need those institutions. But he walked out after 42 years in prison. He walked out a week before his 60th birthday. He went in at 17. And now just in September, Terrell Barros in Rhode Island, who had served 11 years, we were able to get his case overturned. And what's amazing about this is that our students created a documentary. That's what we have them do, is create documentaries, not write papers, file briefs. We want to tell a story. And we find that the most effective way is a short documentary. They're about 8 minutes long on average. And with Terrell's documentary, somebody watched it who was the cousin of the person who actually committed the murder. And he had since himself been killed. And she came forward, and she said everything with great detail about everything her cousin had told her, including about his grief and the fact that someone else that he knew, Terrell Barros, went to prison for it. And that was able to convince a judge to overturn Terrell's conviction. He might still get retried. He's not fully free. He's still under indictment. But he's out of prison. He's working. I went to see him the day after he got out late at night. I went the next morning to be with him in Rhode Island. We're in regular touch, and it's a beautiful thing. So you put it all together, we're now at 7 people, and the number of years is 187 years who served in prison for crimes they didn't commit. They're all free. And what Marty says, and you know, this just shows what a big heart he has. He says, you know, well, everything I went through was so horrible, and I would never wish that on anybody. But look at all the good that's been able to come from it. So he takes solace in the fact that these other 7 people, and there's more coming. We had one we thought might happen yesterday, but now it got postponed until January 12th, but it's very likely they're going to offer a deal that will let him out of prison. He's been in for 20 years, Edward Martinez. So we are firing on all cylinders with this program. And just to give you a sense of the emotion, I want to show a very short clip. As I said, Kenneth Bond, and you'll see this in the emotion that we have together, was like Trey, was also my student in prison, my dear friend. I got to know his daughter. I got to know his son. I got to know his grandmother. And I got to love them like my own family. And I knew him going in every week for many, many years. And here, if the audio works.
Everybody, thank y'all for coming
Straight out of prison.
Free! Free! I'm free! Baby, we free! I gotta thank Mark Howard. Mark told me when I met him years ago, I'm gonna walk you out of here, Kenneth. And that day has come true. Did it? I'm crying too.
It's the greatest feeling in the world. I've been lucky now. This is the 5th person through the Making Exoneree program, plus Marty. This is 6 times that I've had this experience, and it's just, there's nothing that compares. It's so emotional and just beautiful to see somebody get their freedom back and to be a part of that process.
Just because they give you life plus 60, that don't mean that your life is over. That means that your struggle begins. The test begins now.
So I want to show one other picture now that I want to just give a little warning about that. A student of ours made this, and it's meant in jest, so I don't take this seriously. But I did post it on social media and say, this is what it feels like to walk somebody out of prison. So I think I'm Scarlett Johansson there. I want to turn to a different topic, because I wouldn't want you to leave tonight focusing only on wrongful convictions, because in a way, wrongful convictions is the lowest hanging fruit. It's so important because nobody should ever go to prison for a crime they didn't commit. Everybody can agree on that. But through the time that I've spent going inside of prisons and jails, and as I said, I started going and visiting probably with Marty, and then after that in sort of the early 2010s. But in 2014, I really started to go in regularly. I started teaching in prison. And that just brought me into contact with some amazing people. And so here's a picture of a classroom. I started bringing Georgetown students in also. And that's something I've done regularly ever since. I've even taught a number of joint classes where we've got inside and outside students. And notice I never use the word inmate, by the way. Felon, convict, these are horrible, dehumanizing words. Talk about inside students, incarcerated people. And so these mixed classes, I tell my students, you're all equals in this classroom. I don't care what color you're wearing. We come up with all these rules to make it equal in terms of research materials, because there's no internet in prisons, except in Maine. I was able to talk to Leo earlier, one of these amazing students of yours who's incarcerated in Maine. We need to see more of those programs, and I really applaud this school for supporting a program like that. It's so important. It's extraordinary. But through teaching in prisons, I really came into contact just with such smart, creative, thoughtful, dedicated people. And, you know, I hesitate to say this because I love Georgetown and I love my students, but if I had to pick one or the other, I would pick teaching in prisons. First of all, there are no distractions. They're not on their phones. They're not texting. They're not thinking about tonight's party or what happened last night or what FOMO they might have or anything. They're locked in. Well, that's a little too close to the bone, sorry. They are focused. They do their readings, they take it seriously, and their classes are the highlight of their week. And there's something really beautiful. It's learning for the sake of learning. And it's really, really extraordinary. And I've been privileged to be able to spend a lot of time in prison classrooms, including at the DC jail, where we started a credit-bearing program in 2018, where we started actually offering Georgetown courses taught by Georgetown faculty where students get credits. They get transcripts that have Georgetown University, have degrees. Now, many of them won't go on to get their degrees, and DC jail is a place where people aren't there long enough to be in a full dedicated bachelor's program. But when they go out and apply for a job and they can say, I took some courses, I got A's and B's or whatever, it's a game changer in their lives and their prospects for employment and other opportunities when they leave prison. Since we're talking about art, I just have to highlight Halim Flowers. Those of you on Instagram, @Halim Flowers. Halim was my student in prison. Halim was sentenced to 40 to life when he was 16 years old. He looked like he was 10. I'm not exaggerating. And he wrote 11 books in prison. He's an incredibly creative person. Halim, Halim, Flowers. And he didn't have the possibility in the prisons he was in to create art, but he is a very creative person. And since he's been home, he's actually been able to paint. And he paints and he has exhibitions in Paris, in London, in Doha, in LA, and he's just constantly everywhere. And I think I've heard him say this publicly, and he's told me this, but he sold over $1 million of paintings in this past year, in 2022. I'm not sure where he's at in 2023, but he's doing incredibly well, and he weaves in the message of his personal story and experience, what they call the super predator. And yet he's extraordinary. So teaching in prisons, we also have the only mixed gender program. This is Christina, who was our first woman student. We now have many. We are offering 4 courses a semester, usually fall, spring, summer, at the DC jail, and we have a thriving program. We got through the COVID period, which was tricky, and now we're back on our footing. And a big part of that is that from the leadership. We have support from President DeGioia right here. This is the former, makes this noise, former Director of Corrections, Quincy Booth is there. And then these are our students, both inside and outside students, who came in for this celebration that we had at the end of the semester. And it's really just a celebration of life and of learning and of humanity, ultimately. So moving beyond the DC jail, where, as I said, we can offer credit-bearing courses but not a degree-granting program. We were approved in the state of Maryland to start a bachelor's degree program in a prison in Maryland, a maximum security prison, a pretty tough prison that's not a great place to live, even among Maryland prisons. We were able to recruit from the entire state. It's a competitive application process. There's about 20,000 people incarcerated in Maryland. They were all eligible, including women, to apply for the program. And we took 25 in the first cohort. And I believe we had 350 applicants in that cohort, which creates a student selectivity rate of 7%, which is, I love to say this to the provost and other administrators at Georgetown, the most selective program at Georgetown is our program at Patuxent. And so here you see an image from the classroom. Does anyone recognize, we weren't allowed at the time to show his face, but he is the most famous, now formerly incarcerated person, and the most famous exoneree, although they're trying to send him back to prison, a man named Adnan Syed from the podcast Serial. That's still the most listened to podcast in history by a lot. And Adnan, who was not one of our Making Exoneree cases, his case had already achieved tremendous celebrity from the podcast Serial, but he was our student in prison in our bachelor's program. And when he was released, he literally walked out, and there were media everywhere. This was covered, and look at that folder. I mean, Coca-Cola would have paid like $5 million for this product placement, and he's walking out holding a Georgetown folder. And then he came to the campus, and he came to speak to my class shortly after getting out, and now he works for us as a program associate at the Prisons and Justice Initiative, and I have the pleasure of interacting with Adnan on a regular basis. In addition to our prison education work, so we have the bachelor's degree program. We just started our 3rd cohort of that program. It's a 5-year degree program. So in another few years, we'll be having graduations in prison where they'll be getting Georgetown degrees. We also have several reentry programs that I'm really proud of, because one thing that I had come to realize is that while people inside, they're great dedicated students, they come outside and life is busy and fast and technology and distractions, and then you need a job, you need to survive. So we started these 2 reentry programs where people are paid to study. The Pivot program is business and entrepreneurship, and it's in partnership with our business school and with the DC government, where they study, it's a 10-month program. The first 5 months, they study basically a mini business school, marketing and accounting and all kinds of things. And then the next 5 months, they earn internships, paid. And then after that, they get jobs. They get jobs with DC area companies and organizations like Deloitte and Dick's Sporting Goods and some great companies. We also have a paralegal program where, do I have a separate slide on that? Yeah, I'm going to go to this next slide. Paralegal program for formerly incarcerated people who did legal work when they're in prison, which a lot of people do. Every jail has several, usually jailhouse lawyers. Marty was one for almost his entire thing, where he would work on other people's cases. Marty actually helped someone else who was exonerated before he was, by the way, while being a jailhouse lawyer. But when they get out, it's very hard. The legal profession is very closed, very risk averse. So we started pushing them and saying, you need to not just talk the talk and tell others what to do, like law firms tend to do, but you need to do it internally. You need to hire formerly incarcerated people. So we started this program that had actually been in existence for 30 years, a paralegal program, but not for formerly incarcerated people. And we rejuvenated it, brought it back specifically for formerly incarcerated people. And it's a 5-month program, and they do a mini law school, and they're prepared for jobs as paralegals in law firms and legal organizations in DC. And between these 2 programs, we have now over 100 graduates. And I used to say 0, but unfortunately now 1 person is back in prison for a few years. 99% are in employment. They're with their families. We had a big cookout this summer. It was one of the most beautiful things because people came with their kids, and nothing touches me more than seeing kids reunited with a parent who used to be in prison, and to see them happy and thriving and proud. And that's what I kept saying to the kids. You should be so proud of your mom. You should be so proud of your dad. They're just amazing, right? And they really are. And to be able to see the pride in their kids when there's so much stigma and shame associated with it is really beautiful. So we're doing a lot on reentry, and we're trying to really restore opportunities in a climate that is so inhospitable to people when they come home from prison. So putting it all together within the Georgetown Prisons and Justice Initiative, and there's an annual report that you can find online that sums it up, whether it's in terms of wrongful conviction work through Making Exoneree, which is now expanding to other universities, whether it's through our prison education, the DC Jail and Patuxent, or through our reentry programs, both the Pivot program and paralegal program. We're doing, and I don't say this to boast in any way about Georgetown, because frankly, that's not what matters. It's about the people we're helping. We're doing more than any university in the world by tenfold to combat mass incarceration. And the challenge, and I say this intentionally being at another great university, is that universities need to do more on this issue, and they can do more. There's incredible reserves of talent, of dedication, of students, of principled leaders who care, and we need to, I think, move a little bit, and I say this as someone who has had a first career with a lot of research and a lot of writing and a lot of very specialized knowledge, but we need to do more to help people because there's just so much injustice out there, and I think that we're now showing through these programs that universities can make a difference in bringing freedom, bringing justice, bringing the truth to light. I want to briefly mention the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice, because this is a separate nonprofit, separate from Georgetown, that I started in 2020. And what I was trying to do was, in a way, scale a magical part of the experience that I'd kind of almost stumbled on, and to make it something that could be applied everywhere. And that magic is that when you bring people into prisons to sit down with and connect with incarcerated people, it just breaks away the stigma. And suddenly you see them as human beings. You see them as your own friends. You see them as your own brothers and sisters and loved ones, and you care about them in a new way. And there's something to, as Brian Stevenson says, proximity, that changes everything. When you become proximate to people, close to people, you can't look at them as monsters again. You can't look at this issue and think that somehow people should be discarded when you're thinking of a person that you just shook hands with, that person that you just saw cry when they were telling you that they couldn't go to their mother's funeral, right? I mean, there's so much inhumanity in the system, but when you see people and the emotions, it changes everything. And so I was bringing students in regularly, and I remember one time a student said out loud in the room, she said, if only all of America could be with us in this room right now, we would no longer have mass incarceration. And so I kept thinking about those lines and that thought. And then I created the Douglass Project, which tries to do just that. Now, it can't just be in one room, but we are now going into prisons all around the country, bringing outside members of community in. We have created a whole curriculum where people are sitting in a big circle, then they're working in small groups, then they're back in a circle talking about reflections. And the phrase I hear the most is life-changing. This is a life-changing experience, that you can't unsee what you see and what you feel through these prison visits. And we have a thriving program, by the way, at the DC jail, just up the street. So for anyone here who's inspired by this and wants to experience it, we have visits every week, every Monday afternoon, 1 to 3:30, alternating between a men's unit and a women's unit. You can do both. So I invite you and encourage you to have that experience. But we're also operating in Colorado, in Florida, in Louisiana, DC, as I mentioned, in New York, in Michigan, where I was yesterday, in Massachusetts, where we recently started. And we've just gotten the green light from Ohio, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania to start in the near future. And we're going to keep knocking on all the doors. We've got Texas coming soon. We want to be in every state in America. So there's a short video, but in the interest of time, because I think I've been a little verbose, I'm going to skip the video because I think I just gave you the summary, but we've got an amazing group. We've got Sister Helen Prejean, the 80-something-year-old nun who's the dedicated fighter against the death penalty, who's on our board. We've got some formerly incarcerated people who are extraordinary and inspiring. And it's just a great organization that I encourage and invite you to become a part of. And then one last thing that I'll just say a sentence on and then close. This is a little bit of a stealth project that I'm doing that is a big data project that I'm doing with a colleague at the University of Michigan. And we have a grant through the Carceral State Project at Michigan and a big team of researchers from both Georgetown and Michigan. And the subtitle to the Reckoning Project is Holding Law Enforcement Accountable for Misconduct. Because if you look across the country at certainly starting with wrongful convictions, and there's been over 3,200 proven exonerations, mostly by DNA, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Estimates are that 5% of people in prison were wrongfully convicted. With 2 million people, that's 100,000 innocent, right? Think about that, that's mind-blowing, right? And the research shows that in the vast majority of those cases, there was misconduct. Might have been police, prosecutors, might have been experts, might have been judges. There are people who knew something was wrong, and they just went along with it anyway, and they just buried people. And they might have thought, it wasn't him, it was someone else, or he's probably involved, or, there's these very dismissive ways of just not caring about the truth. And what we're doing is using the power of big data, we're creating what you might call a neural network, where every single actor involved in any case of misconduct that's been proven is entered into the database. A lot of them move, they change jurisdictions. Well, we're going to follow them. We're going to follow all the cases they touch. And we've done outreach, starting with Pennsylvania as a pilot, where you can't imagine the prison mail that I get, by the way. It's just overwhelming. We have a whole team just sorting the mail and responding to people and categorizing everything. But we're trying to put together allegations of misconduct with proven misconduct. Because you want to bet when some officer planted a gun or planted drugs or added some enhancement on somebody, when they did that once, they probably did it twice, they probably did it 5 times, 10 times, 50 times. And we want to connect those dots, and we want to help people who've been harmed. Now, not all those people are necessarily fully innocent. They might have been involved in misconduct that should have gotten them 5 years, but suddenly they're doing a 30-year sentence because of misconduct. So we want to bring relief to people who've been harmed by misconduct. I don't care about necessarily canceling or going out. I'm not about revenge. I won't cry, if something happens and there's charges against them, although most prosecutors have full immunity, by the way, which is scandalous. but we want to bring true justice. And most importantly, we want to shine a light on truth, which truth is the least important thing in the current practice of this criminal legal system. And we want to make it, and I think it should be, the most important thing. Truth is what it all should be about. So the Reckoning Project is trying to bring that. So summing it all up, and this, someone helped me make this recently, just to keep track of the different organizations, the Prisons and Justice Initiative, which overlaps with Making Exoneree, also the Frederick Douglass Project and the Reckoning Project. I'm, as you heard me say at the beginning, just trying every waking hour and minute of the day, trying to help support incarcerated people and bring hope and humanity into their lives. So with that, I will close. I thank you for your attention. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here tonight, and welcome your questions and the conversation we'll have with Susan. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Do you want me to sit here?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Mark. That was just so amazing, so inspiring, and also just humbling, the commitment that you've shown and the humanity that we can feel. You've brought a set of people into our lives for us to really be able to connect with.
Thank you.
So we'll have a period of question and answer, and we really invite people in the audience to come up to the mics on either side. If you're really, really stuck in the middle, I think we have, I'm not seeing it, do we have a roving? Yeah, oh, Mercedes will help out with the roving mic, but we really encourage you to stand up and come to the microphone to offer a question. But let me start with something. We talk a lot here about narrative, and you've mentioned it, and you've shared a lot of stories with us. And how do you think about the kind of tension maybe or dynamic around lifting up stories? Sometimes just opening space for stories. And then going to a little more the negative, stories getting used, stories of vulnerable people being used beyond their own agency and choice. And have you, engaged that dynamic and, even fetishized sometimes, right?
Sure.
Yeah. How do you deal with that? Because here we talk a lot about the power of narrative to shape often the way that we engage conflictual issues, and yet it's also the power we have to be able to persuade, right, and move people.
Yeah. No, I think about that question a lot, and Susan, thank you for raising it. I think you're right to point out that there's sensitive ethical issues because, in a way, particularly in stories of innocence, and that's where we really do the narratives and have our students create documentaries. We don't want to do the reverse of what the prosecutors did, which is to paint something that's equally untrue, but just in another direction. And so we start and tell our students every single day that we're trying to find the truth. Usually within a week or 2 weeks for sure, we find that the official version, and we tell our students never read the trial transcript first, because it's going to lock in opinion. You could read Marty's trial transcript and you'll be completely convinced that he was guilty. It's just, that's how the process works, because it's controlled by the prosecution that does a masterful job of telling a story. Typically, the defense doesn't tell stories. Typically, in appeals, they say, don't talk to the media, don't get the word out there. We have this conflict all the time with lawyers who will say, no, we think that we should trust the process. We should just write a well-crafted brief and file it in 9 months and then wait another year for an outcome from a judge. And I tell them, well, if we followed your strategy, Marty would still be in prison, so would all the 7 other people that we talked about. So we feel like it's really important to get stories out there. And we also feel that people remember, people are touched by stories. I could rattle off statistics all day long, and then you'll be like, wait, did he say million or billion and 52 or 500? It's sort of, we forget that, but we don't forget about people. And we find that that's the most effective way, but always in service of the truth. I think that that's really, really important, is not to mislead, not to embellish, but to do it in a beautiful way. And what we really try to do is do a combination of both telling the truth about a case, about what actually happened, what we believe happened, but also humanizing the person, meeting their family, seeing how they interact, seeing the love that they have between each other, amongst themselves, is something that's really powerful and humanizes them. So I think it's a really important tool. I've really shifted all of my work, whether it's in research or teaching at this point, to be about both storytelling and advocacy and the combination of those two things. But I think it's important to do it very ethically and carefully and responsibly.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Do we have a question over here? I saw you, Thomas, and then I'll come to you, Chucky. Please, Thomas.
Mark, thank you so much for this amazing talk and for sharing these stories with us. A theme that went through your talk is trying to make universities a place where we open up, and instead of hiving off knowledge for a select few, Georgetown being the prestigious university it is, right, work to democratize the university. And I'd love to hear maybe some general comments about how you were able to convince a university to work in that way. Until recently, I was director of graduate programs here at the Carter School. Virginia passed a law that said state universities can't make admissions contingent on any past convictions. So what the university in its deep wisdom decided to do was to say, we're going to follow the law. You'll be admitted regardless of your incarceration status, but we won't let you enroll. Right. So the university, George Mason University, took the law, obeyed the law, and just moved the review to say you're admitted. You immediately have an enrollment restriction on you. And you can't enroll unless you go through a pretty onerous process of describing everything that you did to put you incarcerated and to and what your story's been since then. A process that I've got somewhere around here. Dr. Monique Norton is here. She works in graduate admissions at the Carter School. We've tried to fight this with the university. It's really hard to do. Separately, the university also has made it nearly impossible for us to employ a formerly incarcerated student. You know some of the amazing people we have at the Carter School who have been incarcerated. It's just made it really, really hard on us. A rule that we have very carefully obeyed and have never found creative ways to get around. So I just wonder a little bit. I found just these small things that Monique worked so hard on to try to kind of support our students. And it was exhausting, right? And I'm wondering a little bit, just more generally, how do we work to make universities a place where we actually democratize knowledge in this way, right? And make ourselves open to these students, because I just, in a very, very limited experience, obviously, just found it really, really difficult, at least at a public university. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas, for that. That's dispiriting to hear that there was this workaround to stop people. I don't know the issues well, and I don't want to step on any toes, but I usually don't hold back, and I think it's a real mistake. I think that they have different lived experiences are so valuable. It's such an important component, not just of diversity, but of actual ways of thought, ways of living. I have 8 formerly incarcerated people on my staff at the Prisons and Justice Initiative. They add so much in so many different ways, so much insight that I defer to so many times. I tend to run it as a fairly democratic organization. I don't care about status, and I cringe at the word boss. But I really try to elevate them based on their knowledge. We also go to bat for them on salary levels and say, well, they may not have a degree, but some of them are working on the degrees now, actually. And in Georgetown, after 1 year of employment, you get free tuition. So we have some who are going to get Georgetown degrees while working with us. But we've tended to argue, someone who did almost 25 years, that's the equivalent of job experience for us. So we try to find creative ways. But here's the key that we've been able to do. And again, I'm not trying to toot Georgetown's horn in any way, because I would be doing this work wherever I am. But it has been a particularly receptive institution because of its Jesuit identity. And I say this as someone who's not Catholic, not religious, but the fact that it has this identity that is based on helping others, that is care of the whole person, I lean in heavily into that. I've worked all the Jesuit priests over in talks. They love me, and now I've made it very hard to go against what we're doing, because I've basically made it the embodiment of Jesuit values. And the way I did it strategically, you saw the picture before of the president of the university in the DC jail. I've brought every dean in. I've brought key faculty members, key leaders. We run a weekly speaker series, and schedules are busy. I'll wait. Okay, next semester, no problem. Well, I get them in, and once they get in, they want to do more. So that's actually been my secret weapon, is just don't listen to me. Just come inside, and then you'll see it yourself, the magic. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have several questions around. I'm wondering if you will give the mic to Chowki.
Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know of you, I've never heard of you, but I have heard of Brian Stevenson,
Yeah.
and he is one of my super
Mine
hero.
too. Yeah.
May I take the audacity of turning toward the audience and ask them a quick question. What did you find in common in all the artworks that is there? I'm a professor of art here at George Mason University, okay, and art is my field. And I just want to ask, in this 1 hour that we had there, did you find any commonality with all the images? I looked more than once. Maybe I missed something, but there is. I'm sorry? Eyes. Any other comments?
Race.
What? Race. They were all black or Latinos. All of them. I looked again and again. I say, oh, he is white. Oh, he's Gonzalez. He's Melendez. He's not white. He's Latino. And that leads me, I have like 10 questions, but I put them down to 4. So.
To 4. Come have a seat.
I'm honored to be in your presence.
Pick your best.
I'm honored to be in your presence. The first question relating to your inspiration, Marty, I'm just curious how he sustained himself in prison for all these years. What really maintained him? What kept him going? What kept him not losing faith, other than you? The second question is, which is something I'm surprised that you did not touch upon, and this is not a criticism, it's a question, for-profit prisons. I mean, what kind of America we have become when we have a new form of slavery called for-profit prisons, where people literally work the entire day for Nike and for super corporation for $1 a day, and they don't have a choice but to do it. The third question is, was Brian Stevenson was an inspiration to you, and do you know him personally? Because I have read his book, I saw his movie, and I saw that he took it all the way to the top, to the Supreme Court, to really get some people exonerated. And he is one of my living heroes. His birthday was yesterday, by the way. Okay. I have had a little exchange of email with him. And the last question is, have you had any threats because you have proved judges and lawyers and systems in the wrongs? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's
so
see if
given that we've got others,
Yeah, I'll be
please
brief.
take your choice and answer briefly.
What sustained Marty? Some incredible internal strength that he externalized. Marty wrote over 50,000 letters from prison, most of them by hand. That's an average of 9 a day, including weekends. He got himself out of prison by getting other people, including me, to care and to fight and to advocate for him. What was the second again? For-profit prisons. That's a longer conversation, but I want to ask you a question. What percentage of incarcerated people, or just of prisons in general, are private prisons? What's your estimate?
67%.
60-70%? Anyone else want to take a guess? 80? The answer is 7%.
7?
7. And the reason why I ask it that way is because I knew you were going to say something very, very high from the way you asked your question. And here's my answer very briefly. I'm not a fan of private prisons. I don't own stock. I would never buy stock. I don't like in any way the principle of any profit making off of human beings. But to say, and I don't say this as criticism either, that private prisons are the problem is actually a red herring and takes away from the fact that state public institutions are just as awful. They are all awful. And so I've been to private prisons, I've been to public prisons. They're all awful in different ways, and sometimes some might be a little better in some way and some might be in another way. But I worry that the excessive focus, that's often very ideological, and you notice all of my talk is non-ideological. I'll work with anybody who wants to help get people out of prison, whatever their background or party and so on. But that approach to focus on private prisons misses actually and gives in a way a free pass to those who are doing the same type of harm in public state institutions. Now, the motive of profit is there in all of them, and there's still an issue of commissary, of prison labor, and so on that we can talk about. I completely agree with is deeply problematic. Brian Stevenson, yes, my hero. Yes, I've met him. I admire him. I just gave a lecture today where I showed, in my undergraduate class, Prisons and Punishment, where I showed what he's created in Montgomery, Alabama. I've been there twice. It's extraordinary. I recommend everybody go to the Equal Justice Initiative there. And then the last one, threats. So far, no. Hopefully tonight won't change it. But you know, I'm pretty open about my views and my work. I do worry a little bit about where it might come from, and frankly, it would be law enforcement, and that's scary. Yeah.
I am going to.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pass over, but I'm going to flag a remark that I think we're probably all thinking about, or many of us should be. I'll work with anybody. I have a goal. This is something we talk about a lot. If how do you kind of square one's kind of political ideology, and can you work across lines? Can you work with a quote unquote enemy or something like that? Not going to ask you to answer that. I'm just flagging it because I'm sure people are thinking about it. Yeah, no, it's a really good example for us to think about. Please.
Good evening. I am Kevin Norton. I happen to have the pleasure of being Dr. Monique Norton's husband.
Ooh, yay, Monique.
But I rise to ask a question based upon the idea of second chances. Just for a moment of transparency, I finished my dissertation while I was incarcerated in Fairfax County Detention Center.
Congratulations.
And so, second chances. So what I'm finding, or what has been my experience, is that those who have been in and have come out, whether they've been exonerated or done their time, they are really still serving a life sentence because they can't get jobs. They find it difficulty for housing. They find it difficulty to go to school because of these barriers. What of your work, or what have you seen out there that's really allowing people to have second chances? I mean, if you have bad credit, stuff falls off after 7 years. Right. But if you've got 2 misdemeanors and you've done 90 days, that's on your record forever. And I get a job 10 years from now, and they run run a background check. Now I can't get a job, and it's been 10 years. Yeah. I've got a good friend who was a part of my research, who had not done any crime for 30 years and could not get a job driving a school bus because of a conviction, and we're begging folks to drive buses to get our children to school, and he couldn't even apply because he had a federal conviction that was 30 years old. So again, second chances, is there such a thing, is the question.
Yeah, well, that's a great, great question, and I'd love to have a longer conversation about it, but I'll even go one up on you, which is to say, in many cases, was there even a first chance? When you look at Trey, and orphaned at 8 and living on the street and so on, even the idea of you had a first one, you messed it up is kind of the thought, and then do you get a second one? A lot of times there never was a first one. But this is what we're trying to fight against. I mean, when people say, like, what are the action items? It's hire formerly incarcerated people. It's change laws that prevent people from being able to be hired. Break down some of the 41,000 collateral consequences that exist to a criminal conviction after you've served your time. In Unusually Cruel, I show how in other countries, it's over. You walk out of prison. You have served your time. You have paid your debt. In this country, it's never paid. You have a scarlet letter, F, for felon, that will stay with you. It'll come back. It'll bite you at any time, and it can be 30 years later. If you, heaven forbid, have some other mistake that happens, then you'll be a repeat offender. You can get life in prison. I mean, there's crazy stories that will just blow your mind, the cruelty that exists in this country. So, yes, we need to fight against all this. There are expungement fairs. There are clean slate initiatives in a number of states, but not enough, and we need to have it on the federal system too. I support all of that. I think that when people have served their time, it should be over. Now, there can be some circumstances where you can understand that, okay, someone who committed financial crimes maybe shouldn't work at a bank. Crime against children not at a school. I mean, we can all understand, be rational, right? That's something we want to avoid certain potential risks, but we need to think rationally. Instead, we have this sort of one-size-fits-all fear-based system that just hurts everybody, and it's counterproductive to our entire society. So I agree with you 100%, and I want to congratulate you on your journey, Dr. Norton, and that's really impressive and inspiring.
We have just a few minutes, so How would you feel about the people who are standing asking their questions?
Yeah.
And then,
I'm
so
good.
let's hear brief questions from everybody who's standing. So
I can stay all night. I don't sleep anyway. Especially Paris.
Sorry. So everybody ask who's standing, then you get to sit down. And Mark,
Okay, maybe I need to write them down then.
You need a.
I got it.
Okay. Please go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sana. Forgive me. I'm an undergraduate student in a sea full of very distinguished individuals, so I wrote my question down on a piece of paper. And I do want to say that I am not from the U.S. I didn't grow up in the U.S., so any assumptions that I make about the U.S., don't get mad at me.
I won't.
So you talked about this idea of American exceptionalism, and I think that with a lot of the struggles that individuals face with reintegration into society, and historical examples of reintegration, when you look at veterans from the Vietnam War and the way that they were treated when they came back home, it seems as though this idea of evil or these flaws, it seems like people act as if there's no space for flaws in American society. Mm-hmm. And how do you think that this connects this idea of American nationalism and exceptionalism, and what do you think the dangers are that can arise from that?
Wait, you're just an undergraduate student? You should hire her on the faculty. She's ready to teach a class.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Sada. Do you want to take them all first?
Yeah, let's just do it, and then if it's okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I got notes.
Arthur, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. I appreciated your presentation. I work on our program for urban peace building, and got a lot of inspiration from getting a window into the models. I'll leave here with a kind of visceral reminder of the fact that the most meaningful experiences I've had here at the Carter School have been working side by side with students, with community members, with a pressing issue that we're working together to try to solve. So, and I like the open to phone calls. Sometimes we invite in phone calls, but the hotline, community hotline is just one idea that I'm excited about. So I like to think that a lot of the work that I'm working on which is focused on supporting young people who are at risk in education programs, learning about strategies for conflict resolution, learning about social justice organizing, and really affirming their own knowledge and dignity is in an attempt to support them so that they have the kind of support they need to try to, in some ways, fend off all the forms of structural violence and pressures, risks that we have pushing them towards this criminal injustice system. And so I want to get your advice if you have any, because what I'm noticing, and I live in DC, is that we have some good programs, not nearly enough, and the funding's way too little, but they come largely through institutions. So if you're at school and you can kind of there can be an educational project you may get involved with, or even through sports or some other means. But many of the kids who are most at risk, like the kids who live right on my block, are very rarely going to school and don't have many kind of solid connections with any institutions. So maybe from the stories you've heard from the inside, or just if you have ideas about this, I think this is one of the biggest challenges, is how to reach young people who are not having those contact with institutions. And the last thing I'll just say is the mayor has kind of, and others have an implication that, well, if they have contact with the police, we're trying not to have softer penalties, and that's an opportunity to divert them to these other kind of more intensified forms of support. But most of the people I know don't see that showing up through that meet, so there needs to be an intervention before that happens. Yeah. And do you have any insights on what that could be?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark, for doing this for us. I found your presentation super inspirational, especially because I wanted to find out what I could do for my master's degree in Carter School or outside. So I'll keep it short, but I want to ask you, you said that there are cops and people and who just try to take it personal most of the time when it comes to inmates, basically. Well, you said we shouldn't use the word inmates.
Incarcerated people.
Incarcerated people, there we go. Or inside students, as you said. So would you think that there are either the local police, the state police, or the federal police, one type of law enforcement has to be better than the other one? Or do you think that all types of law enforcement is kind of tainted or stained? Or do we have to kind of use a bottom-up approach, if that makes sense, when it comes to fixing prisons from the hands of law enforcement, if that made sense? I wanted to ask you for your advice on this because my view is in law enforcement, like my career field is in law enforcement, so I want to ask which one do you think is higher up or better, doing better than the other?
And what's your name?
Mahida.
Mahida.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mahida. And finally, thank you. Thanks
Mark,
for your patience.
Mark, I just want to thank you for coming and speaking with us tonight and for all of your amazing work. I just have a procedural question to ask, which is that when you discussed getting incarcerated people out of prison, and there were two sort of methods: either getting their convictions quashed in a retrial or other legal setting, or there was the obviously the different process of just getting them resentenced to time served or getting them out on parole or probation or something like that. Obviously, this is a very delicate decision and tailored to each incarcerated person. But if you could just describe and elaborate that process and what, given that given that some people are innocent but are given the chance to not have their convictions quashed but be resentenced, what are some of the considerations that are taken into making that decision and communicating with them to make sure that the decision made is appropriate? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for those great questions. Maybe I'll take them in reverse order. So in terms of, I didn't get your name, by the way. Connor, thank you. In terms of getting people out through the Making Exoneree program, what we do is we take a case and we always tell the students, we don't know 100%. First of all, unless you were there or there's a video proof or something, you never know 100%. And then the question is there a comfort zone where we feel confident that the person didn't commit the crime? And there's sometimes where we don't reach a high enough level and we drop a case. We always have alternate cases that are ready to go if we don't feel that the person was innocent. When we do, we go all out in terms of trying to figure out what happened and to try to make the case that it was the wrong person and that they deserve to be free. But then from there are different avenues that are possible. The highest standard is a full exoneration with compensation, apology, et cetera. That's really hard, really rare to achieve. But we've gotten that before with Valentino, and Marty did as well. Then there are cases where there's other avenues, you might say. Clemency, where we prepare clemency applications. We're doing one in Illinois right now where there's a good chance the governor's granted a number of clemency. We're doing a federal death row case, a man named Billy Allen, who's an incredible artist. You should see some of Billy Allen's art, Patricia. It's extraordinary. He does it from death row. And I've been with him and spent 6 hours with him on death row and seen him painting. It's amazing. We're trying to get President Biden to potentially grant clemency. That's a long shot right now, politically. But hopefully that will eventually bear fruit. Other times there's a certain law. In Maryland there was a Juvenile Restoration Act, which somebody who was under 18 could potentially get out. But a big part of what you have to show is how they're not a threat to public safety. Well, that's part of the humanization part that we do and we have our students focus on. And so sometimes it's parole, where it's about a reentry plan. But we take it on and we say whatever avenue will get a person we believe was wrongfully convicted out of prison, we will follow and we will pursue. Sometimes we do multiple. Sometimes we're filing legal claims and so on, but also doing clemency or doing parole, whatever it is. When we believe in the person, we want them out. Freedom, it's not everything, but it's a lot. It's almost everything. The last part of it, clearing your name and so on, which they usually want to do, that's gravy when you're comparing it to being locked in a cage. So any avenue. Mahada, did I pronounce that right, Mahada? I want to make clear, I'm really glad you asked that question, which is that I'm not anti-law enforcement at all. I'm anti-misconduct by law enforcement, right? And I applaud ethical law enforcement, and I applaud those who can overcome the pressure to either act unethically or cover up or ignore or look the other way when there's unethical conduct. So this whole blue wall of silence is a problem, in my view, where even people who aren't doing it but are knowing and looking the other way. I think that there are tremendous examples of effective law enforcement, of community policing. I think law enforcement need to be connected to the communities where they are serving, right? Serving is a word that is used but not really applied when they come in with military-grade equipment and take over and throw people on cars and so on and repeatedly over police and so on. So I think there needs to be a rethinking, but I do believe that it's possible. And I personally did not support defund the police and those kind of slogans, and I found them to be very counterproductive. And I think they ended up being politically damaging, actually, too. But I believe in setting high standards and meeting them and carving out those who violate those standards. So that's what I'd like to ultimately achieve. And I hope that this answer has made it clear that while I'm never going to hold back on what I see as misconduct, because I find that to be especially unethical. It's one thing to be unethical if you're in business and you cheat and deceive and so on. That's an unethical conduct and practice in business. But to be in a power with a badge or a prosecutor where you represent the state or the people, right? I'm here on behalf of the people, and to lie and cover up and frame people and to know it, there's a special place in hell for people who abuse power like that. I'd like to create incentives for ethical law enforcement. Arthur's question about young at-risk people, I think about that all the time because unfortunately, where did Arthur go? There we go. They wind up in my programs, right? And wouldn't it be great if we could stop them from going down that road in the first place? A lot of our fellows and people who work as part of our team want to actually do that very thing. They want to go back to the community. They want to prevent violence. They want to work with kids. We're actually trying to get funding for a new program called PJI PALS that works with children of incarcerated parents. There's a whole cycle, intergenerational cycle of incarceration that just happens over and over. One of our team members, who's also my student right now, which is mind-blowing, who served 24 years and 10 months, who was sentenced at the age of 17 to 127 years and 8 months in prison. But thanks to the juvenile law in DC, was released. He was not a wrongful conviction. He's been very clear about that. When he was in prison, can you believe this? It was actually at Lorton here in Virginia before they closed Lorton. Do you know who his bunkmate was? His father. Think about that. He barely known his father. They got to know each other when they were both in prison. It's just, and I've known a three-generation father, grandfather, son, grandson. But we need to work to prevent that. I think actually it's the people who've been impacted who have the best. I can go in and lecture in this. I'm not going to connect with these kids. They're not going to listen to me. They're going to listen to Trey. They're going to listen to Tyrone. They're going to listen to people who can have an influence on them. And I think we need to do more to empower them as leaders, as speakers, as role models. I certainly view them that way. And then Sada, did I pronounce that right? Sada? S-E-N-A. Oh, Senna. I'm sorry, Senna. The American exceptionalism, there's a long history. So the use of that term is ironic because the American exceptionalism has always been in a really positive, glowing way. City on a hill, shining light, beacon of democracy and justice. And I say the real American exceptional is actually this unusual cruelty. So some of the examples that you gave and also the mistreatment of veterans coming home from Vietnam is very much, I think, in line with what I'm trying to say, which is let's get rid of that myth and let's be honest. And there are a lot of problems. Again, I'm not anti-American, just like I'm not anti-law enforcement. I love American ideals. I just want our country to meet them. And on the justice front, we are so far from meeting it. So we need to reach those standards and strive for them and push for them. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I hope you'll all join me in this movement pushing for justice that we desperately need in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've given us so much to think about. And I would say if anyone wants a fuller answer to this last question, please go buy one of the books that GMU Bookstore is selling. We are so inspired by what you've brought to us. And I think for those of us who teach, and as Arthur was saying, really value engaged teaching, I think it's going to really challenge us to think about what else we can do to open up our teaching to engage a wide range of students, to really be inclusive and to put before our students projects as meaningful as the ones that you've shown us tonight.
Will he has a book signing? Will he sign the book?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. So thank you again. Thanks everyone for coming tonight.